welcome everyone. Thank you so much for the warm introduction. My name is David Francis, the Vice President of Research at Talent Tech Labs. Delighted to be here today, delighted to be joined by Asaf and Scott, who are going to share their collective wisdom with you. What I thought we would do, I thought a good way to kind of organize the conversation for this particular session was to kind of break it up into a story that's kind of told in two parts. And so we're going to kind of have we're going to learn a little bit about the individuals themselves. We're going to learn about their companies and their kind of organizational recruiting challenges. But then we want to talk about kind of what is pre-talent intelligence state and what is post-talent intelligence state. And ultimately, how did they get there? How did they build a business case internally? How did they roll it out? How did they do change management? And what are the results that they're seeing? So with that, I will start by having each panelist introduce themselves. So Scott, why don't you start?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the stage, and it's just a pleasure to be here. And I'm incredibly excited about the future of Eightfold personally. And let me share more about why I'm excited about this. So no knock to anyone in the room who's been on this journey for the past couple of years, but I was a huge Eightfold skeptic, huge Eightfold skeptic. So that dates back to about 6 years ago. So let me backtrack a bit and share about myself. So I grew up in a place called Togo, West Africa, and shout outs to anyone in the room who comes from the continent. From a modest upbringing, ended up in the US, and I've been in the talent space for about 20 years. But more precisely, the past 5 years or so, I've been heading up talent acquisition for a cybersecurity company called Cloudflare. And we've grown exponentially. We went IPO in 2019, and we've also been growing significantly across the board. And we run well over 20% of the internet on our platform. And one of the key things that I want to share with you all today is that you can, I was able to get past my initial sort of guessing work around Eightfold to be where I am today, and I'm just willing to share as much as I can share. So let me pass it on back to you, Asaf.
Thank you. So I will introduce myself, but we'll start with my company. I'm working for Amdocs. Amdocs is a leading service and product provider for the telecom industry. So most of the large brands you're familiar with, AT&T, Comcast, Vodafone, and other are running on Amdocs systems. We're 35,000 employees worldwide, located in 85 countries. And I've been working for Amdocs for the last 20 years. So when we are talking about switching careers and moving around, working for 20 years, it's a long time. So every few years, I'm basically saying it's enough for me and I'm moving on. I'm looking, and then someone telling me, listen, there is one last thing to do, just do it and you can leave. And 3 years. So I started with a software implementation, project management, business operation. And in the last round, the CHRO asked me to join HR, and I'm leading the global talent acquisition, strategic workforce planning, HR tech and operations in Amdocs. And I truly love the connection between the technology, the people, and everything. So I think I will stay in this domain for long years.
Love it. I guess the risk you run with, trying to leave is they just say, okay, go for it. So, I'm not quite ready to try that strategy myself, but maybe something I should look into. Thank you so much. So we've got a pretty diverse panel in terms of, the companies themselves. So, Cloudflare, extremely high growth company, smaller, but extremely high growth. We've got a larger, been around for a very long time, mature global organization. So, different kind of organizational needs or challenges. So I'm curious, can you walk us through how did you get from, maybe we'll start with you, Michael, since you were a skeptic. I want to hear, how did we go from being a skeptic to identifying like talent intelligence is this is the answer to whatever our problems that we've identified are, and we would love to hear what those challenges were. And then how did you build the business case and get buy-in from the executive team?
Great. So the baseline of all of this is my primary philosophy is if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right? It's from an old African proverb. So when I joined Cloudflare, we had roughly about 400 people. And the goal was for us to scale, and we identified a couple of challenges that we needed to solve immediately. As many of you know, when you join a startup, a prominent startup, you identify quick things that you need to fix and then to move the needle. And the first one was essentially, it took us about 4 months to hire one person because we would question every skill. We would want to create the perfect match. It was sort of like painting a Da Vinci painting, in many ways, to be able to hire for the company. And so I was looking for solutions, and one of my recruiting operations specialists suggested Eightfold. I was so skeptical about it because it was eightfold.ai. And thinking, okay, here we go again with another person trying to solve everything in the world with AI. So I met with Eightfold. We walked through some of our challenges that we were having. We talked at length. In fact, I cut the meeting short because I wasn't convinced at the time. It wasn't the fault of the CSM that I met with, but it was my own skepticism. And then I sat down, looked at our ATS, looked at the fact that we had thousands of applicants in the ATS that we couldn't really curate, looked at how long it was taking us to hire, looked at how fast we needed to grow as a company to be able to achieve our ultimate objectives. Right. And I decided to give it a try, to test and learn. One of the key things I'll mention here is that we can sit here and talk about a lot of metrics, talk about the best plans, but if at the end of the day we can solve real problems with the tools and the solutions that we implement, those sing a lot louder. One of the main things that we solved is that particular year we decided to attend Grace Hopper Conference. And many of you are very familiar with the conference. You receive thousands of applicants. You get a resume book. And we said, guess what? We now have this AI tool, and we're going to use the tool to be able to see if we can identify some of the talent that we're looking for, be able to map that to the skill set that we're looking for. And we hired 5 people from that conference alone. So that sort of took care of itself. The other piece is that we implemented a recruitment strategy where we were expecting hiring managers to spend 20% of their time and leaders to spend close to 30% of their time involved in every single recruitment activity. And so what we did was expose them to AI early on. And I will advise this to anyone in the room, is that never implement anything in a silo.
Yep.
You can tell a great story independently. No metrics can really show a full picture. But getting someone to just put their hands on the tool and utilize it is what will really help. So, in a nutshell, I think I've painted a good picture of it. But I'm sure I'm rambling here a little bit.
No, brilliant. I was going to say, so you were the individual. It wasn't like your CFO shutting it down. It was you.
It wasn't.
The CFO wanted to do it, and you were saying, wait a second. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, that's off.
So I would like to echo Scott on the holistic view and not a single scenario, and say that we were a successful company. We are a successful company, profitable, growing company. So coming to the CFO and asking for investment to solve issues with AI, you need to have a compelling story. And I think that what happened is that we experienced the great reshuffle, resignation, you name it, and we had to hire thousands of talents to cope with the demand on the one hand, and when you are going to hire those talents, everyone is going to the LinkedIn and running the same queries of search and sourcing, and all the companies are around all the same traditional talent pools, and the competition is really fierce. So the challenge of recruitment. The second, I would say, is we experience turnover of experienced employees that we thought will never leave. And they moved out and took the knowledge with them. And when we are talking with the employees, they believe that it's easier to find something outside than to get an opportunity inside the house, which was very difficult to hear. And the third is when you are in a situation when you need to hire many and people are leaving and knowledge is being taken, then you are in a shortage and you are starting to be creative. So suddenly people are doing things beyond of their job and people are moving around that before you would say, no, this move cannot happen. But suddenly when you are in this timing, everything starts to move. So we grouped everything together and we said, we need to think differently about the organization. And we need to understand that the competition for talent is here, will stay, especially for the niche skills. Employee will always look for development and career opportunity to grow. And the way we looked at the organization as a rigid thing is not relevant anymore. So our philosophy is to build the organization around the employees and really be employee-centric organization with the understanding that culture replaces structure as our operating model. So not design routes and those type of things. And create this agility in the organization, you must use a very advanced technology to do it in scale, right? I cannot do career coaching for 35,000 employees, and I cannot explore the whole market for more than 900 jobs that I have in my organization. So I need to do this in scale, and this is what we promise to the organization and what we are delivering.
It's brilliant. So a couple of quick questions, if we can. I'm curious to know, to the extent you can share, what your kind of existing infrastructure, looked like, kind of pre-April, pre-talent intelligence. What was your, ATS and other kind of systems that, and was there any? How did you think about kind of making that all kind of work together seamlessly, or did that come into play at all? Either of you. Both.
So in the early stages, we had, just like everyone else would, we have an ATS. We had Greenhouse as an ATS. We still have Greenhouse as an ATS. We used a couple of sourcing tools. Uniquely, we used, I think most things were tracked on spreadsheets for the most part if you worked in startups. So the infrastructure was very lean in many ways. So one of the main things that we're looking at is how do we infuse or how do we insert a particular platform throughout the entire recruitment process or the hiring process in our company. So that came in very, very handy there. Another thing I want to mention is this. Using a credible platform to solve some of the hardest problems is probably what is going to help you. So in 2020, this is a year after we went IPO, we were receiving close to 200 applicants quarterly or so. And it was in the middle of the pandemic. Lots of other companies were cutting their intern programs. But then we looked at some data through Eightfold, which showed us that we were receiving lots of applicants for our intern roles. And many of them were even applying for full-time roles because they were out of school. So that was an interesting case study for us, and we ended up doubling our intern program in the middle of the pandemic. So there are real problems that we can solve. There's a shortage of talent, but then there is also a way we can remain very creative and nimble in helping our organizations solve things, regardless of sort of like the infrastructure that currently exists.
You already had those people there. You just needed a different way to identify them and
There we
actually
go.
find them. Yeah, love that. Asaf?
For us, we had the opposite problem. We had too many solutions, and we are working in a software company, right? So everything you can develop. So we are developing and developing for ourselves, for our customers. We have SuccessFactors as our main system, but we are using AI solutions in the sourcing domain. We have LMS that we did homegrown solutions, and we have many tools like all the verification, certification, the background. You have plenty of tools in this domain. And what you experience in an enterprise is that employee, not the HR as a user, but employee is a bit lost. There is so many things he can use and access and consume that he is lost. So we looked at the Eightfold from two angles. One, of course, it's overlay on the ATS, and it's our skill repository. But also, we see it as the portal for everything the organization can offer. So if I have now separate mentoring site or LMS, or if you want to refer a friend, everything now is through one portal of Eightfold. So it also helps us to consolidate and be the gate for the offering that we have for our employees.
Well, that idea of the candidate or the employee experience. I don't know if you read it. There's a story recently where the new CEO of Uber basically started driving for Uber on the weekends to try to better understand what the Uber experiences were like. And as part of doing that, just basically every weekend was like, oh my God, this is broken, this is broken, this is broken, and started making fixes and changes. And so understanding or being empathetic towards what a bad application experience is like, or a bad employee experience trying to navigate different systems can be eye-opening. Love that. One last question here before we jump into kind of implementation and then post implementation results and metrics is what was the team, or was there a team that was involved? Kind of how did you get a collective? I love the saying that you had where if you need to get a group together if you want to go far. So what was the team that helped make this reality?
So as a skeptic, I tend to gravitate towards my toughest critics first. So one of the things I did was, full transparency, was a team of 4 recruiters at the time, and we're still growing the team. Now it's a large team, and we're a global team, but back then my team sat, just for a visual, we sat right behind our head of engineering. And our head of engineering sat right next to our head of product.
The dream.
That's a dream team, specifically. And our CFO sat a few ways away. And our head, of course, as a small startup, there's a lot of upside in hiring engineers, also a lot of downsides in hiring engineers, and it's hard attracting the type of engineers that you want. So I enlisted my toughest critics, head of engineering, head of product, and then I also exposed the CFO to the platform. Of course, the CFO had other metrics that they were looking into, and can we grow as a company? Can we then go public as a company?
Right.
And then
You did this pre-IPO.
Pre-IPO, yes. So it didn't have all the bells and whistles that it has today, so just a disclaimer. But what we learned through that very quickly was they were asking really, really hard questions early on, and they were insisting on getting clear insight on use cases for the actual product. One thing that stood out for that particular group was that they viewed Eightfold as a diversity recruitment platform. It was completely unintended. I can sit here and tell you a pretty story about it, but
Please.
it was completely unintended. We just wanted to see how we can identify the right skills, be able to compete in the right fashion, but it became our de facto diversity sourcing platform. And our head of engineering would encourage all the engineering leaders to spend a certain number of time on the platform. So 2 things here. 1, I would say enlist your critics. 2, what you are intending to do sometimes could, there's possibly another way that they're looking at the platform, and you have to be really open-minded and see where that leads.
Right. You can almost create like an internal brand around it, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Anything to add, Asaf?
Yeah, I think that we are looking at Eightfold as a technology, top of the notch technology company, but the implementation, as I said, it's a cultural shift. And the team, you need to do real change management activities and identify the stakeholders and think of for each one, what is it for them. So we brought the business in We brought the managers that manage the employees, hiring managers, some of the employees, of course, the IT. So it's a cross-functional group that helped to implement this solution. And it's a business-driven implementation. It wasn't an HR-driven implementation because we came to solve the business problem. And this, I think, was the main achievement to reach where we got.
Brilliant. So now let's talk change management, implementation, and results and business impact. And so since you kind of kicked us off there, maybe we'll start with you. So I guess a handful of questions. Just maybe walk us through the kind of whole implementation journey. But I'd be curious, did you roll it out in like one region? Did you roll it out globally? How did you do change management?
I want to relate maybe to the KPIs first and to your example of Uber and experience. We have a very strong people analytics team, and we did the research. And we did the research on what happens to employees that applied for internal job and were not accepted. Usually, you are looking at the people that were accepted. And we found out that the attrition or turnover level of those guys are 4 times bigger than the overall the company. So once you apply, that's it. You are on the move. So when we talk KPIs, it all starts with data and with analytics. So we came with this data point to manager and told them, listen, you cannot hold your employees. They will leave you. This is the data. So, for example, we changed all the methodology of how we do internal mobility. So we basically are doing internal sourcing. We are approaching employees that already applied. We are offering them positions, etc. So one of the KPIs, for example, is improving the internal mobility, reducing the turnover rate of those guys that were on the edge of leaving us. There are more KPIs, of course, the talent acquisition KPIs of the time to hire that was reduced, the agency's cost because we have exposure to very large talent pools. I can go more and more. The implementation, we try to look for quick wins and areas where it's painful and the change management is less complex. So to have it in talent acquisition, there is maturity there, less managers involved. It's more about the candidate experience. This is quick win. To create talent pools using CRM and campaign management and have, like alumni. When you are a 35K company that is operating for 30 years, you have very large alumni. To create a really well-managed alumni pool to be able to rehire people, this is extremely important, quick win, to get exposure for your skill of your workforce and be able to optimize the allocation or assignment to task. This is something we did. So we went global with the use cases that were... From the
get-go, you went global.
Sorry?
From the get-go, you went global.
From day one.
Yeah, okay.
But with use cases that required less change management, and we are going up with a more complex full marketplace and other scenarios.
How was can you touch a little bit on the internal mobility program that you kind of re-architected? Curious to know, specifically what changes did you make, and was there any pushback to it? I know sometimes that can be tricky, poaching other people's talent. People like the talent, or hoard talent even internally on their own team, right?
Yeah, so for us, to provide opportunities to employees is a key. And what we did, it started from the cooling period. When you move to new role, what is the tenure that you need to have in this new role before you are allowed to move to another role? So in the beginning, the manager said we need 2 years until he been trained, learned, and productive. But when you go to the market, you see that people are switching jobs after 18 months, 16 months, so it was not relevant. So we reduced dramatically the period that you are allowed to move between jobs. The second thing was the ability to be proactive, not waiting for someone to apply, but we as a talent acquisition, when we have acquisition, we are allowed to go and offer position to employees. without asking the managers, without anyone. If you have the tenure and you were either applied for position in the past and did not accept it, or you opted in, we can approach you. So this proactive approach is unique, and it's a major change. It's a major change, but it contributes a lot for, of course, retention, engagement, many other elements.
It looks like Asaf had more of a global approach to this, and you can tell it's a very different company. It's a larger company on the tail end of the product. We were early on in this, and based on where everyone was in the company, we implemented this first in North America. And it was key for us because we had all the leaders centered around North America. Many of them were there. And we also didn't really understand the full international capability of the product. So implementing in North America and creating a feedback loop with the Eightfold team was really instrumental for us. We had some early challenges in Europe with some of the language-specific requirements, and also in Japan. And it was, I think what helped there was to be able to feed that back to the Eightfold team. So one size doesn't fit all, but definitely, as Asaf mentioned, measure everything. Your organization might have different sets of KPI to measure, and your organization might have different sets of challenges that you're facing. But I would say really look at the journey, the full journey, look at where you need to get to, and go global or go regional first.
Brilliant. So Scott, your team took the you took some of the battle wounds so Asaf could have an easier time deploying
exactly.
globally. Brilliant. I wanted to open this up actually to the audience. If anybody, I don't know if we have like mics. We've got about 3.5 minutes left. So I had one question, but if folks had any questions, if you just want to raise your hand or yell it out, happy to take this. We've got one right here. Questions on the interview process. What do you need to understand about it, kind of before you would implement something like an Eightfold?
Yeah, or anything else.
Yeah.
Oh, great question. So the way we started, I was only there for about a month or so before we started to implement Eightfold. So I didn't get a full understanding of the interview process. I only had a general view of it, but it wasn't necessary at the time. What was more necessary is what skill sets were we looking for across the board, right? So that is what I looked at. And then understanding the skill set led to now how do we need to assess this talent as was getting through the door? What rubric should we come up with? What are the questions? How do we measure this? How do we measure them when they start? How do we measure culture? All that sort of thing. So it wasn't really necessary. Yeah.
So your assessment changed after the fact?
Yes.
Not before the fact?
A lot changed.
Hi, you had mentioned you use Greenhouse. So what does your recruiter experience look like? Are they working in Greenhouse before pivoting to Eightfold, or is it chair swiveling, if they call it?
Excellent question. So we start in Eightfold. So that's our starting point. No knock to Greenhouse, but it's an ATS, and inherently ATSs can be hard to search into. And then why start in Greenhouse where you have a tool that overlays on top of Greenhouse? So that's where we start our journey. Hiring managers start in Greenhouse. Even our executives start in Greenhouse. And one key area I wanted to mention quickly for you is that we ran a lot of numbers, a lot of our metrics, and found out that independently, Eightfold's metrics were almost identical to everything we crunched on our side. So when we downloaded the data from Eightfold, it matched, and I think that was one of my selling points. I failed to mention that earlier.
Take confidence in the system. All right. My last question, if we can, answer it in 18 seconds, is on AI and the whole kind of conversation that happened around AI. Was there any pushback internally around AI risk, and how'd you get over that?
So far, we did not get a pushback because the system allow the employees to edit, change the identification. We did a few pilots before going live, So we measure the satisfaction of the pilot population two aspects. One is how they are happy with the experience, with the direction we are taking, and we got a score of 9 out of 10. So people felt that they are connected to what we are trying to do. The identification, we started with 7 out of 10, but still, as I said, the employee gave us a rank of a 9. And this is something, everyone should consider. It takes time for AI to learn the organization, to learn the language in the organization, the job hierarchy, the jobs and role in the organization. So don't expect that day one you open the system and it's perfect match. But if you got your employees connected to what you want to achieve, and it's done in transparency together with them, I think that it's overcome the complexity of the implementation.
All right, with that, I'll say thank you. Asaf, Scott, thank you so much. It's been
Thank you.
brilliant.